Hi, welcome back to Cubs and Culture. This episode is going to be about why, if a positional player is going to be traded, it should be Ian Happ and no one else. I like Ian Happ as a player. He's something like a baby Zobrist, in that he's defensively competent at a lot of different defensive positions. Like he plays a serviceable second base, and he plays a serviceable center field. So just because of the defensive spectrum, that probably means he's good. Good in left, good in right, can handle first, maybe third. I doubt he can handle shortstop. In any case, he's a switch hitter. He hits from the left side, he hits for power. From the right, he hits for average. So he's a kind of a nice, sort of like a baby Zobrist, where he's just a nice, professional, super utility type player. I really think you get this on Bleacher Nation, and you also get this on Bleed Cloudy Blue. A lot of fans are like, "Oh my God, Ian Happ should have been Rookie of the Year," and that's just nonsense. He only put up a 1.8 WAR for 2017. And I also think the way in which he came up was sort of during a bad stretch in the first half. I think a lot of people are overreacting to the recency of his helping us during that bad stretch in the first half. And in any case, there's two big reasons why, if someone has to go, I want it to be Ian Happ. One is I just don't like him as a I find him incredibly boring. He's somewhat similar to Bryant in that he's sort of quiet and reserved, which is fine as like a personality thing, but he's not fun to watch, and he doesn't have the value of Bryant. And as far as like watching players, the more they bring to the table in terms of value for the team, the more I'm willing to put up with them being quiet and reserved and treating a professional, treating a game as like a profession. There's something of a sweet spot with this stuff where you can be a really fun player, but also be a really good player. Again, I think George Springer kind of hits this, but let's not get into the Astros. In any case, I don't see any evidence that Ian Happ is a generational talent, and I briefly checked around on some of his projections. It looks like the difference between him and the other various players like Russell and Baez, they're not going to trade Bryant. They're all about a 1 WAR difference. So, for example, one of the trades that really annoys me is people and it's been floated, the Padres have floated it a couple of times, is Baez for pitching. But the thing is, Baez posted a 2.9 WAR and Happ was 1.8 WAR. Given the vulgarities of WAR, which I've talked about in the past, and then sort of also how like that's less than less than 1 game. That's almost certainly them roughly the same level of talent. And in any case, projecting that further, looking at the models earlier today, Happ isn't. At this point, again, he has such a small sample that you can wonder about this, but he's not really projected to be all that much better than anyone else on the team. And for the next 2 years, the model I looked at, the models I looked at had him 2 WAR better than Baez over the next 2 years, so one a year. The thing is, that is such a slight difference that it's almost like. That's assuming he meets his projections, which he very well might, and also assuming that Baez doesn't that assumption is that he plays up to his projections and Baez plays down to his. but that's like we don't actually know that. And so because of that, I don't think the amount of you gain in terms of like baseball prowess is large enough to compensate for the fact that not so much that he's boring, but the other major thing is, of course, Happ wasn't on the championship team. So like the Cubs have been waiting 108 years for a championship team. So why you're like the team's a good team. You're talking about on the margins, and the margins aren't large enough to justify like the amount you gain in baseball prowess is so slight that what you lose in sort of like fan experience of loyalty and connection to the team doesn't really all that matter that much. It seems like you're trading sort of the certain joys of watching players you've connected to and have gotten you a championship for the uncertain joys of getting another championship. And this is sort of a huge issue I have in with the trading. Is it like, okay, so it doesn't quite make sense to me, like on a philosophical level, why people hate bandwagon fans. Because if you think about it, if all you cared about winning and the actual, I mean, a team isn't just the uniform, right? Because there is sort of continuity of players, even today when there's more trade, when there's more like because of free agency or whatever. There's still pause for a second. There's still sort of a continuity. So, like for example, Rizzo, I think will be a Cub for life, and then Brizzo and Contreras at least for the next 5 years, half a decade, which is a long time. I can't imagine unless there's catastrophic injury that Epstein and Hoyer would trade any of them. And so, what does it mean? So, like, so what does it mean what does it mean to be a fan of a team if all the players change 1 year? Right? Why? So, like, because that's in essence what a bandwagon fan does, is they switch teams because they're trying to chase that championship. But if that's considered a bad thing, but then why isn't it a bad thing when GMs and presidents of baseball operations so change the composition of the team through trades and free agency or whatever? So again, maybe there's a sort of sweet, maybe there's a balance here, because if players aren't working or you're not competing, you have to make changes, but it still seems weird to me that we seem to hate on bandwagon fans, but then we expect our GM and president of baseball operations to be completely ruthless and switch out any player, at any point because of needing to win a championship team. And I also think this is sort of fundamentally irrational because it's such a disconnect between the long haul and the regular season and the postseason. So if you build the best team in the regular season, that team, when the postseason starts, has at best a 35% chance of winning the World Series. So like in some ways, I don't even think you should think about winning the World Series because because of the vulgarities of the postseason, there's such an element of timing and luck that it's beyond anyone's sort of control. That I think you really should aim at winning a division. So if you're again going back to like this trade for Happ and Baez, if you're talking one WAR, which is one game, if they meet their projections, but they almost no player ever does, you're not like the National League Central, even with the Brewers sort of yipping at our heels, isn't that tight. This isn't. We're not in a Yankees Red Sox division. if the Cubs lose the division, they're not going to lose it by a game. They're going to lose it by more than a game. Likewise, if they win the division, they're going to win it more by the game. So the division is weak enough where one game shouldn't matter here and there. So it really kind of bothers me that Epstein sort of posed that he was willing to trade a position player, and then a whole bunch of other Cubs fans went after, well, we should trade Baez because of his strikeouts or whatever. Yeah, I'm a fanboy of Baez, but whatever. When I'm more like, trade Happ. Like, he has done jack shit for us. Also, he's really boring. Okay, so maybe this episode was a little bit weird. Sort of getting into some of my philosophical stuff. I really don't get the tension between people hating on bandwagon fans and then also being completely okay with teams being completely torn down and changed because of needing to compete the next year. Now, some of it's unavoidable, and again, maybe at the margins, but like, I feel like the longer you waited for a championship team to get formed, the more the margin should be small. Anyway, so that's going to be it for Cubs and Culture. Hopefully this wasn't too rambling. I will have visuals eventually. I'll see you tomorrow. We'll probably be doing something with classic 1950 movies. If not, maybe another Cubs one. Anyway, see you a bit.